Thanks for attending our workshop today. My name is Aaron Fairbrook. I'm the Program Director / Interim Executive Director for Sonoma RCD. And we wrote a grant with the Sonoma County and their Vegetation Management Grant Program. And we did a large shaded fuel break up near Trinity Road, between Trinity Road and Nuns Canyon Road. And so funding for this webinar is through that program, which has been a great program for us. It was 4 miles of access roads. And I also wanted to mention that there is a lot more effort going on in the Nuns Canyon and Trinity Road. It's been spearheaded by the Fire Safe Council of the Yakima Volunteer Fire Foundation. So they've been doing a lot of great work up there. And anyways, we have a couple speakers today. Our speakers today are the Resilient Landscapes Coalition, who will discuss landscaping in the defensible space zone, including design and maintenance and plant choices. And then we'll hear from Jeff Lemelin of Fireline Mitigation, who will discuss structural hardening, defensible space, and basic fire behavior. So thank you, Bob. Why don't you start us off and we'll get it going.
Cool. Thanks, Aaron. And hi, everybody. I'm going to share my screen. 1 second. All right. Can you see that? Yep. All right. Good. So yeah, as Aaron said, my name is Bob Schneider. I work with the Sonoma Ecology Center conservation nonprofit in Sonoma Valley, and we are one of the partner organizations in the Resilient Landscape Coalition, or RLC. RLC, with funding from Sonoma County, is a group of orgs that provides education and outreach to residents, landscape professionals, and defensible space inspectors. This presentation is for anyone interested in making their landscapes more fire-wise, well, simultaneously increasing beauty, sustainability, and biodiversity. I'll show some examples as we go, trying to make this illustrative, and we'll have some time for questions. And I'll be speaking somewhat to, this is connected to Jeff's piece around structural hardening and fire behavior, but this is mostly going to focus on the landscaping and plants and things like that. All right, so who is the Resilient Landscapes Coalition? As I said, we're a partnership of multiple organizations, namely Fire Safe Sonoma, led by Roberta McIntyre, and Marika Ramsden is also really involved. Habitat Corridor Project, led by April Owens. April Owens is a landscape designer focusing on native plant landscaping. Habitat Corridor Project is your nonprofit focusing on building habitat in residential environment. And then, as I said, Sonoma Ecology Center, represented tonight by me, Bob Schneider, also Ellie Inslee, a founding member, and Eric Shoes, environmental planner. And finally, the UC Master Gardener Program of Sonoma County, with a founding member from that being Mimi Enright, and Jennifer Roberts also being a big part of our coalition as well. So specifically the Sonoma Ecology Center, since I'm representing them, our mission is to work with our community. We focus in Sonoma Valley, but our leading efforts throughout Sonoma County and beyond even. And our goals are to identify and lead actions that achieve and sustain ecological health in Sonoma. We have staff that are dedicated to a broad range of services. I lead the ecological landscaping program with the Ecology Center. So we're focusing on design, implementation, and maintenance in the residential setting, helping homeowners with building more ecological landscapes that are also fire-wise. So, just to start, because there's a lot of misconceptions and understandable fear around how we do landscaping in a time of unpredictable, catastrophic wildfires, right? A lot of folks can, out of fear, be too drastic and remove all vegetation from their landscapes, causing other issues, I think making a not so beautiful setting. And other people can feel kind of overwhelmed and not know what to do, so maybe don't do anything at all, which also is not a good approach. So I just included this picture to start us off to like demonstrate that our landscapes can provide us so much beauty, can provide so many ecosystem services to wildlife. This is a native plant with the common name coral bells. Heuchera is the genus. And this grows under the shade of oaks. It's really beautiful, in my opinion. And you can see it's nicely spaced, at least 6 feet away from the trunk of that oak tree in the background. And, it's providing nectar, it's providing nesting habitat for birds. So I just wanted to show like this is a nice little example of how beautiful plants can be, and that we want to have them. So during my time today, I'm going to talk about some defensible space principles. As I mentioned, Jeff's going to really dive into that more than I, but I'll definitely provide some like ecological context for, why are plants important? We focus on California native plants local to our region. Why are those important? And then I want to provide you with some practical information on designing and maintaining your landscape with defensible space in mind. Also, as I mentioned already, there are some misconceptions around like how do we do landscaping while also being fire wise? How do we avoid what some people call a moonscape, which is, like I said, just like rocks and no plants whatsoever? Do we have to cut down our trees? There are a lot of questions. So I'll try to get into some of those in our time. So starting with like ecological context for the landscapes directly outside our homes. Turns out the yard that we have outside our homes have the potential to provide tons of valuable services and functions to our local environment, wildlife. As I've mentioned already, like creating habitat, you can reduce erosion, sequester carbon, conserve water, so much more. So I just want to, really drive home that how we do our landscaping really matters for the environment. Some statistics just to really land that point. So between 1982 and 2001, right, a little under 20 years, 34 million acres of wildland were lost to development. That's suburban development, that's commercial, that's all wildlands being turned into something built, right? That is the built environment. So that's not good news for sure in a lot of ways. And that same built environment that's getting turned into development has a lot of potential to still restore and maintain some of the ecosystem services that previous wildland probably provided. Some of the key actions that contribute to like restoring those ecosystem services are designing with habitat in mind, choosing regionally appropriate California native plants, at least 70 to 80% of the time. And then I'll get more into the details of design, but we like to help folks think about planting in islands of plants, so we can have like clusters of plants, that provide habitat, beauty, cover, while breaking those up so that there isn't this continuous mass of potential fuel for fires. Also utilizing integrated pest management. So, sustainable landscaping does make a difference is the take home here. And just some fun photos of different kinds of wildlife, right? We see here like everything from soil organisms up through caterpillars in the center photo, all the way up to this beautiful, cute little chickadee at the top, just above the caterpillar, right? Eating a caterpillar. It turns out that most of our native songbirds are highly, highly reliant on caterpillars, butterfly and moth larvae. And also turns out that native plants are disproportionately way more important for supporting that caterpillar life. Insects have a really special relationship with specific plants. So if you want birds, if you want butterflies, native plants are very important. And yeah, I'll do a little intro on defensible space, the concepts, and then Jeff will go into more detail. But fire can cause a structure to burn in a number of ways. It can be anything from wind-driven embers, radiant heat, direct flame contact, and always important to remember when we're thinking about making our homes and our landscapes more fire-wise, starting with the home, the actual structure, is the most important place to begin. Home hardening, and again, I'll let Jeff get into that, but that is always the place to start. Landscaping is second. Just wanted to say that. Here, just a basic intro to some of the three defensible space zones. So basically, your defensible space zones move out in a concentric ring away from a structure, right? So this photo shows the primary home with a red line that is 0 to 5 feet out from the structure. And then the next one with an orange line marked is 5 to 30 feet out, and then 30 to 100 feet finally. And each of these different zones comes with different recommendations, guidelines, even rules on how we do our landscaping. So that's what I want to help explain, unpack a little more. One thing to note too is not all graphics are perfect. This shows the defensible space zones radiating out from the primary home here, but then there's this second like garage shed building. Really, that should also have its own defensible space ring radiating out from that structure. Every time there's a new structure, generally, we want to be thinking in terms of defensible space zones. All right, so zone 0, again, this is the 0 to 5 feet radius out from a structure, right? We see some really nice photos just to start with that of like beautiful creative ways that we can work with this 0 to 5 space. You'll see here that there's no plant material. There's no built up leaves. This is stone. This is like mortared in cobble with a nice paver walkway through it. So that in and of itself is pretty illustrative. The bottom line with zone 0 is that we want to, some people call it the ember resistant zone. We want to limit any combustible material in this zone 0 area so that embers can't land there and then ignite and then reach the structure, right? So basically no vegetation, no planting is recommended. CAL FIRE is working on legislation to actually make it legally mandated to not have any vegetation against the house. So this is really important to understand. It also goes against a lot of conventional landscaping. You know, most landscaping you see in the suburban environment is a lawn that leads up to foundation planting of shrubs right up against the house. That convention is now becoming more and more outdated. One, lawns can use a lot of water, but also the foundation hedge planting can really be a fire risk. So depending on where your home's located, it's worth considering changing the landscaping in that regard. Yeah, so as I was saying, you know, you don't really want to have vegetation. Oh, we got somebody coming in, by the way, guys. Yeah, you don't want to have vegetation up against the house. Don't want to let leaves build up. I'll get into maintenance in a little bit, but this is non-combustible material. Also, some people will use mulch near the house. You don't want to have a combustible mulch, so no arbor mulch. Some folks have used compost, but generally nothing combustible. see here. Some other examples of zone 0. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be absolutely just like bare ground or concrete. People can do really creative stuff. This photo all the way on the left of the slide has gravel, like a gravel path that then slowly blends into like low growing perennials that are well maintained. The only thing I don't like about that photo is you might see this hog wire panel against the, like, built into the lower part of the deck. So really that should be 1/8 mesh to reduce embers from getting under the deck, right? So it's like, it's that attention to detail that's really important within your landscape and home. In the center photo, there's a nice example of using vegetation, right? This is like a well irrigated, really low growing, well maintained ground cover between pavers. And let's say you know, you live in an area that's fairly low hazard severity as designated by CAL FIRE, the county. Some folks, I'm not saying this is the way to go, but some folks do use some well thought out vegetation in zone 0. So it's just important to say there's ways to kind of get creative, but generally we want it to look something like the photo on the left or all the way on the right. The one on the right, I would probably extend that gravel area out. It's ideally it's 5 feet out too. So it's like, yeah, just good to see it in the landscape. And moving over to zone 1. So again, now we've moved beyond zone 0. We're now 5 to 30 feet out from a structure. In this area, with the Resilient Landscape Coalition, we've worked with fire advisors, firefighters, defensible space inspectors, horticulturalists, so on, to really try and figure out solutions of how do we design planting that is beautiful, but also fire-wise. So the general strategy is to plant in islands that are separated by pathways or some other kind of non-combustible landscape element that basically acts as a fuel break to break up the continuity of like flammable material. In this area of like zone 1, where you have lower growing or you have islands, you want lower growing, usually like 3 foot at mature height plants. I wouldn't for the most part use like woody shrubs in this area. It's more like as you see in these photos, the one at the top, there's a nice example of like a pathway winding through that's beautiful, that's also serving as that fuel break, like I was saying. And then over on the right, there's some California buckwheat that are beautiful. They're in flower. And over on the left, there's sticky monkey flower and other fairly low growing California native shrubs that, well maintained and well placed, you can have in your landscape. Down in the bottom, the photo shows a native sedge, which is a grass-like plant, really beautiful, rolling green texture. If those are maintained well and irrigated well, those can be fairly a good plant choice for this zone 1 area. Yeah, I think that's enough to say for that area. I'll give a few more photos. Again, on the right here, this photo shows a nice wide pathway with a stone retaining wall. And then again, beautiful, like spilling over ground cover and like mid-sized shrubs. And with trees in the background, you can see that, it says in this slide here, right, that I'll get into maintenance in a little bit to unpack this, but trees, even shrubs, woody shrubs can be fine. It's all about the right plant in the right place. Some other things to consider, your mulch choice. Most landscapes have some kind of mulch to keep weeds down, keep moisture in the soil. Your mulch matters, and there's been some studies done on the different flammability, like combustibility of mulch types. We generally recommend the best kind of mulch is a composted wood mulch. That tends to be harder to find. So the second best is like just a nice, big, chunky arbor mulch. What you don't want are more fibrous mulches, like gorilla hair is a common name for it, or it's shredded redwood bark. It's shredded bark mulches are on the no list for mulches. But mulch is really important. Like I said, it serves a lot of purposes. So you want to have it, you just want to use the right kind in the right place. Okay, so yeah, actually just a couple more. One other element that's a great thing to do in zone 1 and zone 2 really are these rain gardens or seasonal creek beds, right? This one in the middle, in the bottom middle, is actually filled up with water, which I think is beautiful. And it's a great way to like utilize rainwater that's maybe coming off of your roof, sink it down into the landscape. And it can have a dual purpose of breaking up the flammable material in your landscape, right? If you have islands of planting on either side of this and then a nice 3 to 5 foot wide rain garden, you've effectively created a small fuel break. So some nice ideas to think about. And then finally going into zone 2, in terms of defensible space, not all properties have this zone, right? Because this is 30 to 100 feet out from a structure. So this tends to be more rural, wildland urban interface kind of properties, but still important to really consider. One thing I'll say, zone 2 has kind of a dual function. It serves as a connection with the natural environment. It's kind of this transitional zone where it usually, in Sonoma County, it's like adjacent to a forest area, while also being connected to the built environment, right? So it's important to think about that so that, our strategy doesn't need to be eliminating all vegetation. It's about essentially creating like a shaded fuel break, which is, a strategic treatment of vegetation that reduces fuel loads in an area. So, pruning and spacing is really important in zone 2, maintaining proper horizontal. So, horizontal plane between plants and vertical spacing. I'll get into specific recommendations in terms of spacing, but proper spacing is really important in zone 2. Larger woody plants, larger groupings of plants are appropriate in this area, and again can be broken up with pathways. A lot of folks will use arbor mulch or even allow leaf litter to drop in zone 2, and that is totally appropriate, especially during the winter months. The main thing in this zone is we don't want to let combustible organic material build up on the soil too deep. So, sometimes during a drought year, we don't have as much decomposition. So if leaf litter starts to build up and, it's getting beyond 2 to 3 inches, that can present more of a fire risk. So it's good to keep an eye on that. Don't let, mulch material build up too thick. But generally, this is an area where we can allow leaves to fall, mulch to just sit and break down over time. Yeah, generally, we don't want to remove everything down to bare soil. That's not good. Here are some more like suburban or urban examples of these are plantings that are far away from buildings in the zone 2 area. So you'll see they're denser. They're more continuous rather than being a smaller island. They just continue and continue. And then in terms of spacing, So I like these photos. I actually really like the one on the right a little more, because what it shows is that these are groupings of plants. They're not just a single plant as shown in the photo on the left. So we're thinking about spacing between our islands of planting. And then your spacing really depends on the slope of the landscape. So less than a 20% slope, which is pretty common, again, unless you're more into the wildland urban interface, like rural properties, less than a 20% slope, you want 2 times the spacing. So if I think the drawing is illustrative. Yeah, so 2 times the spacing, and then you can see as you get steeper and steeper, you need to increase that spacing, because as fire moves up a hill, it can preheat the material above it. And so you want to, if you have a steeper slope, that fire can heat up material further away. So you need to increase the spacing. And then we'll talk about vertical spacing as well. Essentially, you want at least 6 feet of vertical height between the ground plane and your lowest branch on any trees or large shrubs. If you have low growing plant material underneath your tree, then that needs to be at least 3 times that, or there needs to be 3 times the height of that plant material, that ground cover, between the ground cover and the tree. So essentially, this is about pruning. This is about placement of planting. Yeah, I think that's good. Here's a good real world case study. So what we have here actually is the much maligned juniper hedge or shrub. For a good reason, it can build up a lot of dead woody material in the center. It's full of really volatile oils that are pretty flammable. Not a good plant to have up against your house. This is in zone 2. This is in the 30 to 100 feet out from the home area. And for now, the client's goals were not to remove the shrub entirely. They wanted to keep a section of it. So you can see the before, this juniper is growing all around the trunk of this tree. It's not properly horizontally spaced, and then it's also not properly vertically spaced. You can see there's only about maybe 2 to 3 feet between the top of the juniper and the lowest branch. So the after photo shows proper horizontal and vertical spacing. Basically, the plant just got pruned away to create enough space that there's not a continuous continuity, basically, of fuel. So yeah, just a little recap on materials. Like I was saying, we're planting in islands. So you can have well irrigated, well maintained perennial plants in islands of, like, groups of islands, right? And between those, what do you have? I talked about arbor mulch in zone 2. So like further out, you can have some good mulch. Between your islands, more in zone 1, 5 to 30 feet out from the house. Some folks have used, and fire advisors have okayed this in the past. The science is always changing, but well irrigated, really well maintained, low growing grasses, or like a lawn alternative in between your groupings of plants, tend to be a lot less combustible. And then finally, gravel, stone, hardscape. Essentially, we talked about those rain gardens, pathways, lots of different options you can do there. Going into maintenance, design is very important. Putting the right plant in the right place, very important, right? But maintenance is at least 50% of the work of making your landscape more fire-wise. That's because unmaintained, a lot of plants that would maybe be fine if well maintained, otherwise build up a lot of like dead twiggy material, get overgrown, so on. So, I talked about in zone 0, the 0 to 5 feet out from the house, that the maintenance there is keeping all combustible material away from the structure. That means dry leaves, that means plant material. That also means, general, plastic stuff, lawn or yard furniture, a lot of things, anything combustible, really. We want to keep that away from the house. Zone 1 and 2, if we have planting, some of the main goals are, just generally cleaning up clutter and debris, right? Your normal yard maintenance, that's removing built up material, definitely dead and dry plant material, keeping your mulch that's in zone 1 and 2 a good distance away from the trunks of plants, and also wood fences. This is a little often neglected thing in landscaping. Fences often can spread fire between houses, right? So keeping a little gap, doesn't necessarily need to be 5 feet, but at least somewhat of a gap between your wood mulch and your wood fence is ideal. Also keeping a wood fence from, you want to make sure a wood fence doesn't directly contact a home, the home siding, which I know so many fences and gates are made out of wood, but that's an important thing to consider. Yeah, so let me get into some more visual examples. This is, I think, really, really descriptive, because so many people think of shrubs, and when they think of shrubs, they think of shearing, which is basically, or hedging, some people say. That's basically what you see in the top left. It's like a shrub that you took a hedge or two, or hedging clippers, and just trimmed away all the outer leaves and foliage to make a nice little ball or shape. And that's pretty standard in landscaping. What that does is it creates a lot of really densely growing material that also kind of builds up dead twiggy material in the center of the plant. Usually when you shear a shrub, the only thing that's alive is the outer stuff, because that's all that can get sunlight. So rather, we want to steer away from shearing. I know it's a pretty conventional landscape practice, but this is a no-no when it comes to maintaining a landscape for fire safety. Instead, we want to think of thinning shrubs. So there's a lot of great examples, both in real life and a nice little drawing on this slide. You see a dense shrub with a lot of more closely growing together branches and twigs. And afterward, you see that after the pruning work, nice open spacing, sun moving throughout. It's just basically removing the buildup of material. And I think, yeah, this is important, that when you prune, when we're maintaining our landscapes, we really want to be thinking about the impact we're having on wildlife. A lot of birds use our gardens as nesting habitat. They're coming more and more into our suburban landscapes. So ideally, we want to try to steer clear of really aggressive thinning and pruning work between the months of March and August. That's nesting season. So try to aim for fall through winter and early spring. I like this example for maintenance. I think it really drives the point home. So in the foreground here, this is a native manzanita, probably Dr. Hurd or Lewis Edmonds. I love manzanitas so much. They're often found on, quote, do not plant lists. They grow in chaparral. They can burn fairly hot. That said, this is a very, very well-maintained plant, properly spaced away from a structure, and you can see the vegetation growing underneath it is very low to the ground, kept well irrigated. So this is a good example of a well-maintained landscape. And then in the background, right up against what's, I don't know, maybe a eucalyptus or some kind of large tree, just to the left of that tree is a overgrown, probably wisteria, some kind of common landscaping hedge or shrub that isn't maintained. And so that plant might not show up on a quote, do not plant list, but in fact, in this real life scenario is going to be more of a fire hazard than this manzanita. So I just want that to make sense, because that really shows the importance of maintenance. Your plant choice is important, but also how you maintain it. As I said, that doesn't mean you can just put plants wherever you want. Putting a juniper right up against your house, seen in this photo, or bamboo up against the structure, not good ideas. These are both in different ways plants that build up a lot of flammable material, and bamboo can have a lot of dead wood in a clump of all different shoots of bamboo. It drops a lot of leaf litter that can build up really thick. So I personally wouldn't put a juniper or a bamboo out in the landscape because bamboos can be invasive. Junipers are non-native. But let's say you already had one, and it's 30 to 100 feet out. Your bamboo patch is 30 to 100 feet out from a structure. You don't necessarily need to go in there with heavy machinery and remove it if you don't have the money or want to, right? It's all about how you maintain it and where it's placed. Yeah, I just wanted to share some eye candy now for like good examples of plants that can be used in different zones. This is for zone 1, like I was talking about, low growing, fairly herbaceous, so not like big, thick, woody branches, but more fleshy kind of plant material. Some examples here are your native yarrow, which I'm sure a lot of people know. This is different colors of native monkey flowers on the top right. Beautiful plant. On the bottom left is a species of native buckwheat. That's an excellent pollinator plant. And finally, on the bottom right is a native seaside daisy. Beautiful long flowering plant too. So these are all like, you don't see a lot of dead or brown or woody material. This is green, fleshy, healthy material that's created. It's the right plant and it's well maintained. So yeah, final points here. Plants are important. Trees are important. In 1 year, this is a fun fact, a mature tree will absorb more than 48 pounds of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and release oxygen in exchange. That's a single tree. So we don't want to just be too ham-handed removing vegetation out of concern for fire, because there are upsides to having vegetation on your landscape for you and the environment. And yeah, finally, I just want to say thank you. Again, I'm Bob, work with the Sonoma Ecology Center. We're representing the Resilient Landscapes Coalition. There's a ton more information on the Resilient Landscapes Coalition website. You can see here. There's a lot to cover here. So I would encourage you to check out our site, reach out, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. Just looking to see if we have any questions. Looks like no. So we'll just keep going on. Jeff, are you ready?
Yeah, ready to go. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, sound good.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Bob. That's a really good foundation. I always learn something when I in these webinars, and thanks for the cool pictures of what to plant. It's always empowering when you see those photos and kind of see that it doesn't need to be a desert, and I can totally agree with that. So my name is Jeff Lumlin. I've been in the fire service a little over 20 years. I'm a captain with Nevada Fire Protection District. And then I'm also a volunteer battalion chief with the Sonoma County Fire District. A few years ago, I started a company called Fireline Mitigation. And we started this company because we just got tired of seeing all the loss from these wildfires. And we wanted to do something to get ahead of it and try to help people to prevent losing their values at risk. Most of my work has been with large wineries. I travel throughout the state, kind of consulting. We fly drones and we tell them what to do to harden their properties and how to create defensible space and make plans on what to do when a fire comes through. So that's what Fireline mitigation is. And I've been friends with Aaron now for a while, and kind of tapped me on the shoulder to come kind of share a little bit of the knowledge that we have learned, unfortunately, over the last 5 years. What got me into the fire service was the Oakland Hills fire that was close to my house. I grew up in the Oakland Hills, and I saw that fire, and that was the first fire that I fought. I didn't know much about what I was doing, but we were just grabbing a shovel and doing what I can. And it took a long time before I saw a fire behavior like that again. When I first got in the fire service, we always wanted to go down to LA, Malibu, and kind of see to go fight fire down there. And that's when we got the Santa Ana events, wind events. And so that kind of did a shift. And so when Lake County was the first, it started to get bad fires there. And then here we are now in Sonoma and Napa County. Thankfully, we've had a reprieve this year. There were some lightning strikes up to the north, but it's been a good year. And so my presentation is going to really be diving into structural hardening and then getting into some basic fire behavior. I have a bunch of little small clips to show and kind of help to, I think, just kind of capture what Bob was talking about and kind of give you another visual representation of what it looks like when an ember storm's hitting a structure. And then, so I have some fire videos from obviously all the fires we've had in Sonoma and then in Napa. And then my last fire that I was at was up in Auburn, the mosquito fire. So let me go ahead and share my screen and I'll get started. Okay. So first, I'll just do a little PowerPoint here and have some videos embedded in here. So let my internet catch up to me here. Okay. So that's my logo there, Fireline Mitigation, firelinemedication.com. That's their website. And we also do work with residential communities and residential homes. But our biggest clients have been large wineries, mainly Treasury Wine Estate. We've been working with them, Behringer, Stag Leap, Sterling, but we work with anybody. So we're going to be going over fire behavior and structural hardening. And like Bob said, he touched on a little bit of what I'll be talking about, but redundancy is always good with these topics. So fire behavior is, so what dictates fire behavior is fuel, weather, and topography. So Bob just got into a lot of the different fuel types and plantings around homes and then in the different zones. But fuel and homes are fuel as well. You see Coffee Park, that was just all fuel. It's just like a forest. All those homes stacked close to each other. And weather and wind is the biggest factor. Everyone is kind of in Sonoma, Napa County really knows what a red flag warning means. I would say before the Tubbs fire that it didn't really make the hair on the back of your neck stand up when we were under red flag conditions. But unfortunately, that's just how we learn as humans is through disaster and loss, and then everyone gets educated. And I talk to people a lot more. They understand what dictates fire behavior. But I just want to talk just for a second about weather as it pertains to extreme fire behavior. Every fire that we have had in Sonoma and Napa County, the biggest factor has been the wind. When we have fires that are spotting 1 to 2 miles ahead of itself, it's really hard to make a stand against it as firefighters. During the Kincaid fire, thankfully, we were able to evacuate whole communities, and we were able to make a stand on the 101 corridor to prevent it from going to the coast because the models were showing that it was going to go to the coast. But when we have these wind-driven fires, we can't expect to get a fire engine in every house. It's just not realistic. There's not enough fire engines within the state. It takes 24 to 48 hours to get the fire engines from LA up to here. And that's if there's nothing burning down in Southern California. And so in the perfect storm, like the Kincaid fire, we were able to get a lot of resources because that was the only fire that was really going that was demanding resources at the time. But when we get wind-driven fires, we need to have standalone structures. So that's putting into place what Bob was just talking about, the different zones and the structural hardening and ember resistance. You know, a lot of the homes that I've seen that we've lost have been to very small things. And that's what kind of born our company, Fireline Mitigation, if you will, is just trying to make a difference in those small areas. So if there's not wind, then we can bring fire engines and go direct on these fires. What I mean by direct is we can get water right directly on the fire with our hoses, we can cut line, and we have time to actually make a difference. When wind is a factor, we usually are trying to find opportunities to make a stand, but a lot of our time and energy is spent that first 12 hours of these wind-driven fires is doing evacuations and saving lives, because that's the most important thing. We can rebuild a home, and there's been a culture shift and throughout my career that we don't risk lives of firefighters to save property that's going to be lost. We'll risk our lives a lot in a calculated manner to save savable lives. Yeah, but we'll only risk our lives a little in a calculated manner to save savable property. And I think citizens mainly, they understand that. And then lastly, it's topography. So Bob talked a little bit about this, the slope and the aspect. Are you on the north aspect, the south aspect? It burns differently. The fuel's different. The vegetation's different. The moisture's different on what aspect that you're on. So the more, it's not just slope, but it's also the terrain. So are you in a drainage and box canyons, ridge tops? So I always give the analogy that if you were to take, let's take, you know, Mount St. Helena, for instance. If you were to take 10 million gallons of water and dump it on the top of Mount St. Helena, wherever that water comes down on that mountain, that's where you're going to have the most extreme fire behavior, because that's where your box canyons are, that's where your drainages are, and those drainages act as funnels for fire. Fire is trying to just find the path of least resistance. And it was talked a little bit about it, about the different types of heat transfer. So that's where you get the convected heat columns, preheating the fuel in front of the fire. So anytime that you have those terrain features, it's going to cause the fire to burn more extreme. Okay, so slide 4 here is this is just above Lake Sonoma. This was a Stewart incident. You can just kind of see some embers. We were scouting out the fire and found it down by the lake. And you can see the branches moving. That's convected heat. Embers kind of getting up from the canopy. Not a lot of wind on it right now. So a little bit of wind, but you can see it's a pretty good slope. You see that road kind of acts like a natural fire break a little bit, but it's so steep that it's kind of just burning right over it. So that's just a representation there. My internet's kind of a little bit slow right now. So let's go on to the next slide, but you kind of get an idea there of that. All right, this next video is up at the Gustafson Winery, and it received a lot of damage there. And this is just a really good representation of direct flame impingement, radiant heat, and embers. Just let it load here for a second. Get offline, please. I just told my wife to get offline for a second and see if it speeds up my internet. There we go. So you can just see there how the fire got up into the canopy. We did have a lot of wind. When the fire gets up into the canopy, that's the worst case scenario. And so we were able to make a stand there because we did have a safe place to park the engines. The engines were a little close to the fuel, and so we had to move it in the middle of the firefight. But once that main fire front comes through, and then we have all these small fires around homes. And if you have like in the 0 to 5 foot zone, if it's not has the right vegetation, we're losing homes to 5, 6, 8 inch flame lengths. And so all those embers that come through, and then the main fire front comes through, that's not necessarily when your home's burning, but it's when these embers are dropping and all these small fires that are next to your structures. And a lot of times that's when we're losing homes. Could be something as simple as a window open when you're evacuating. So the three main reasons we lose structures are, number one is embers. So we deal with embers through vent screenings on your foundational vents, soffit vents. Any vents needs to be 1/8 inch mesh screening. Now they have WUI compliant vents now. A couple of the names are Vulcan vents or Brandguard vents, and these vents are they're expensive, but they will prevent ember intrusion. So embers is the number one reason. Number two is direct flame impingement, and then radiant heat. So our defensible space and the structural hardening is going to really be what dictates how well your home survives when a fire front comes through. So this is an ember generator by the Insurance Institute that they have in a huge warehouse, and they build homes and then they just cast embers onto it. That's what this video is going to be. If it loads here. You see the vegetation right in the 0 to 5 foot zone, even though it's not a lot, but it starts. It's just a good visual representation. There's another video that I don't have, but it kind of shows it, a house right next to it that has good hardening and good defensible space, and it doesn't catch fire. So that's a quick kind of overview, and then I just want to show a video here. This video was from the mosquito fire, and you can see that have multiple homes that were burning, and we had a video guy that was embedded with us for a little bit. So this is my crew here on the engine, and we protected the home that we were mainly at. We were able to save it because it had good defensible space. And then the fire actually blew over the home we were protecting, and we went up and were trying to put out the rest of these homes up here. And so this is just a good visual representation of the fire behavior. And we were on this fire for a week, and we were not in the mop up phase, but it blew up when the inversion lifted. So the inversion was the smoke that was kind of all socked in, but it got a little bit warmer, and then the smoke lifted, and then the fuel got solar radiation on it, and then they had a ember that just went across the fire line, and it was at the bottom of a steep slope, and then this is what we were fighting. And at this point, it just goes from structure to structure ignition. And so thankfully we had a lot of resources in here. Yeah, it is a lot of fire, but we were able to get in there and save some of these mobile homes and preventing it from just going into the city of Forest Hill. But you can just see the radiant heat and direct flame impingement. So that's kind of the fire behavior that you're seeing here. And this is my crew here, and we're going in and just trying to put out what we can to help prevent the fire from just keep going into town. And we were able to make a stop because we didn't have wind. and it was at the top of the mountain, so we weren't dealing with steep slopes anymore. So this is when a scenario where we can actually get in, and yeah, there's a lot of fire, but we can get in and make a difference. All right. And then I had a little bit here. I'll jump back to this slideshow here. There's kind of different types of heat transfer. So direct flame impingement, as we saw, it's just fires directly touching the house. And then ember transport through convection heat, through wind. And the embers can go 1 mile, 2 miles. I was up in the Caldor fire. That was a few years ago up by South Lake Tahoe, and they had an ember cast that was 4 miles. So when these huge smoke columns can transport embers a really long time. During the Tubbs fire, my friend in Sebastopol had a big piece of burning pine cone that landed on his wood pile all the way out in Sebastopol. So it's just a lot of energy. So direct flame impingement, embers, and then radiant heat. That's kind of the heat transfers that we deal with in wildfires. So for the structure assessment, I always start in a systematic way, and I start on the roof. And I'm looking at, is the roof simple or complex? There's a photo here in a second that'll show you that kind of the difference. But a complex roof is going to have a lot of hips and ridges in it. And it's just any roof that I would deem complex is one that has a higher percentage of accumulating leaves and debris. Gutter guards, obviously gutters that are full of leaves. It's just going to be a receptive fuel bed for embers. And so it's good to either make sure they're clean during fire season, or even better yet is put in a non-combustible gutter guard. The eaves, when they're boxed in meaning like you look up at your eave, you can't see the rafter tails coming out. So that helps with the transfer of heat when they're boxed in. Siding, obviously non-combustible, it's in good condition. Dual pane windows, weather stripping in your garages. So if you think about, like, if you were to dip your house underwater, if you were to take your whole house and put it underwater, wherever water is going to penetrate your home, that's where your weak links are for embers. And it's that big of a difference. It's the small things that make a very big difference. So here's just kind of like a representation of a simple roof. You can see here on the left, it's just a simple gable roof, not a lot of hips and ridges. And then as we move over, you see it's more complicated. And so you just get more debris. A lot of times on that bottom right picture, right where that dormer is, like that's where you get the debris, and then the siding starts to catch fire. So it just takes more maintenance and just knowing where to look. So we start, on the roof, and we work down in the vents. We look at the eaves, the siding, and then, like Bob said, we work from the house out. But we start with the house, preventing ember intrusion, and then good construction material, and that it's in good condition. I don't have a photo of my house. I've almost lost my house twice now, in the glass and the Tubbs. The Tubbs fire was 600 feet to the west. The glass was 500 feet to the east. So I cut my I cut my fence that was attached to my house, and now I have 5 feet of non-combustible fencing that I've welded to prevent that wood right up against my house. So here's just a picture of like the open eaves. It talks a little bit of schematic of how the hot air and the gases from the fire come in, and then it gets up into the eaves. Obviously, the exterior wall there. Class A rated roof. So there's a way that so all roofs by law in the state of California have to be Class A, and that started after the Oakland Hills fire. A lot of wood shake roofs in the Oakland Hills fire, and I remember seeing homes burned all the way down to the ground that were blocks away from other homes that were not burned. So it's just they had a lot of wood shake roofs for whatever reason. And so here's just a picture of a boxed in non-combustible soffit, and just how the hot air and gases are deflected away from the building. Okay, so that's let's see. Oh, this one more video here. This is just above my house during the glass fire, and we couldn't get fire engines up into this area. And my wife, who's a volunteer firefighter with me, we were in our pickup truck, and we were able to save this house with their garden hose and a shovel. So you see, it's just these small fires kind of creeping all on these leaves all around here, and you lose your house just from that little fire right there. Just coming in these leaves, coming in, and they had a wooden deck there, and so it's not always a big raging fire that's going to burn your house down. Most of the time, it's the small things that make a really big difference. Aaron, that's what I have for my presentation here. Is there any questions about structural hardening or fire behavior?
Thanks, Jeff. That was great. Pretty intense. Let's check the chat. I don't see any questions. Does anyone have any questions that they want to say? Okay.
What's up, Mike? Thanks for joining it, Mike. I think you're the only guy joining us right now. What's up, man?
I'm the only one. Oh my goodness, you putting on such a good presentation. I hope you are recording it, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It'll be available on your website there.
Yeah, we'll put it on a website or something where it's accessible for others to see for sure. So
Good. Well, good. Well, I'm overdue to get back together with Bob on my landscaping stuff. His life has gotten in the way, but I'll be back to you, Bob.
thanks for showing up.
Thank you. It's a good presentation.
Okay. Let's see.